The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicolaes Tulp. In 1632, Rembrandt van Rijn was 25 years old and virtually unknown outside Leiden. He had just moved to Amsterdam, the richest city in the world, carrying nothing but his brushes and an ambition that bordered on arrogance. The commission he received that year came from the Amsterdam Surgeons Guild, a group portrait of a public dissection led by Dr. Nicolaes Tulp. The body on the table belonged to Aris Kind, a convicted thief executed by hanging that same morning. Most painters would have arranged the observers in a neat row and delivered something forgettable. Rembrandt made it a story. In the lower center of the canvas, Kind's pale forearm lies opened, the tendons lifted by Tulp's forceps, rendered with surgical precision. Around him, 7 faces lean in at different angles. One man stands on his toes to see. Another glances between a catalog and the arm. In the upper right corner, one observer looks not at the body, but directly at you. Tulp stands apart, calm and authoritative, his left hand raised in a gesture that mirrors the tendons he is demonstrating. What history forgets is what Rembrandt quietly gave Kind. He turned the dead man's face slightly away from the room, away from the observers, away from the audience, away from us. A small, private act of dignity for a man the city had already discarded. No one had asked a 25-year-old to be that thoughtful. He simply was. The storm on the Sea of Galilee. This is the only seascape Rembrandt ever painted, and it has been missing for 35 years. Stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston in 1990, it has never been recovered. The empty frame still hangs on the museum wall as a placeholder. Completed in 1633, the painting depicts the moment Christ's disciples wake him during a violent storm. The boat tilts sharply, its sail tearing in the wind. One disciple grips the mast with both arms, soaked through. Another is sick over the side. In the stern, Christ sits completely still, just woken, neither frightened nor angry, simply present. Now count the figures. The Gospel records 13 men on that crossing. Rembrandt painted 14. The extra figure grips a rope at the back of the boat, turning to face the viewer directly. Art historians have long identified this face as Rembrandt's own self-portrait, inserted quietly into the storm, not as a disciple, not as a believer, but as a witness. He painted himself into the moment of greatest fear, holding on, watching everything with wide, uncertain eyes. What is forgotten about this work is the question buried inside that gaze. In the middle of the storm, with the waves rising and Christ just woken, Rembrandt turned his own face outward and asked, "What do you hold on to when everything around you is breaking apart?" The Jewish Bride. No one knows who they are. The title was invented by a 19th century art dealer who glanced at the painting and assumed it showed a Jewish father placing a necklace on his daughter. He wrote it down, the name stuck, and for 200 years, people accepted a label that was almost certainly wrong. The couple likely represents a biblical pair, Isaac and Rebekah, or perhaps Tobias and Sarah. Some historians believe they were Amsterdam merchants. Others see Rembrandt's son, Titus, and his fiancée. The uncertainty is part of the painting's power. On their garments, Rembrandt built up the paint to a sculptural thickness, layer upon layer of ochre, red, and gold, applied with a palette knife, creating a surface that catches light like actual embroidered fabric. On their faces, he used the thinnest possible glazes, barely a film of paint, to achieve a softness that disappears when you try to photograph it. The man's right hand rests gently on the woman's chest, just above her heart. Her hand rests lightly over his. Neither looks at the other. They look inward, into some private shared space that you are allowed to witness, but never fully enter. Vincent van Gogh stood before this canvas in 1885 and later wrote that he would have given 10 years of his life to sit in front of it for a fortnight with nothing but a crust of bread. What is forgotten about the Jewish Bride is the weight behind its tenderness. Rembrandt had buried a wife, lost 3 infant children, and watched his fortune dissolve. Every careful brushstroke on those 2 faces was painted by a man who understood exactly what it costs to hold someone gently. Which of these paintings surprised you most? Let me know in the comments. The Return of the Prodigal Son. Rembrandt was dying when he painted this. His son Titus had died in 1668. His partner, Hendrikje, had died 6 years earlier. His house had been sold to pay his creditors. He was working in a rented room when he completed this enormous canvas. In the lower center, the son kneels with his back to the viewer. His head is shaved. His clothes are rags. His left shoe has fallen from his foot, and the sole of his bare right foot faces outward. Look at that foot. The skin is cracked and blackened. The heel is raw. It is the foot of someone who has walked until there was nothing left to walk on. The father stands above him, his hands resting on the son's shoulders. But look carefully at those two hands. The right hand is wide and strong, a man's hand, firm and steady. The left is slender and gentle, unmistakably softer, almost feminine. Rembrandt painted the father with two different hands, one for justice, one for mercy. In the shadows behind the reunion, several figures watch in silence, barely resolved, present but indistinct, the way witnesses always are at moments that belong only to two people. Rembrandt finished this painting the year before he died. He had lost almost everything the world told him to value, and what he painted at the very end was this: two hands, one strong and one gentle, resting on the shoulders of someone who came home. Self-portrait with two circles. Most visitors to London never find Kenwood House. It sits at the top of Hampstead Heath, a pale neoclassical villa surrounded by parkland. Those who wander in almost by accident find, in a room on the ground floor, what many art historians consider the greatest self-portrait ever painted. Rembrandt made nearly 100 self-portraits across his lifetime. He began in his 20s using his own face to study extreme expressions: shock, laughter, fear. As he aged, the expressions gave way to something quieter. In this portrait from around 1665, he stands in a white cap and heavy studio coat, palette and brushes in hand. Behind him on the wall are two large, incomplete circles, never fully explained. Some scholars see maps. Others see a reference to Apelles, the legendary ancient painter said to have proven his mastery by drawing a perfect freehand circle. The most enduring theory is that they represent painting itself, the lifelong, impossible attempt to make something whole. His face carries no vanity and no performance. The eyes are steady and tired. The mouth is set. It is the face of a man who has outlasted his own reputation and is still standing in front of a canvas. By 1665, Amsterdam's art market had moved on towards smoother, more decorative painters. Rembrandt was considered old-fashioned. The commissions had slowed, and yet the brushwork on his coat is broad, fast, and completely free, the strokes of a man who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. The Syndics of the Drapers Guild. In 1662, the governing board of Amsterdam's Drapers Guild needed a standard group portrait. 5 men, their names recorded, their status confirmed. Rembrandt was 60 years old and recently bankrupt. Not the obvious choice. He took the commission and quietly dismantled the entire convention of the group portrait from the inside. The 5 syndics sit around a table covered in a dark red Turkish cloth, their account books open. The man second from the left has half risen from his chair, caught mid-movement. Every face is turned toward the viewer, composed, alert, carrying the particular stillness of men who are very good at assessing what stands before them. Rembrandt placed the viewing angle just below the table. You look up at these men slightly, enough to feel their authority, not enough to feel crushed by it. For 2 centuries, this painting was catalogued as competent but unremarkable, a professional commission, nothing more. Then the 20th century looked again. What had been forgotten was the psychology of that collective gaze. These 5 men are not posing for posterity. They have looked up from their work at exactly the moment you entered the room, and the longer you stand before this canvas, the more certain you become. They were expecting you. They have already formed an opinion, and they are waiting, with infinite patience, for you to explain yourself.